Welcome everybody to Talk Freedom today. Jim Hogue and myself, Emily Peyton, we have a very special guest. It's Kristen Ragusin, and she has a very special book that we are excited to learn about. It's called The End of Scarcity and the Beginning of Abundance. How did you say it?
The dawn of the new abundant world.
Oh, yes. And Jim has had an opportunity to learn more than I have. So I'm going to take a back seat here and just with my questions that might illume something. Take it away. I'm so excited.
All right, well, I will introduce Kristen, sort of. We met shortly after, we met online and by phone shortly after Ellen Brown wrote Web of Debt.
Mhm.
And her first edition of Web of Debt was 2007. And I don't think Kristen had thought about writing a book at that point, but she certainly has done her homework and produced this one. And so it's been an exciting journey for both of us because we both jumped into the public money arena a long time ago. And when I had my radio program, I interviewed everybody who had written anything about it. So I had a long background of interviewing great people, and I did study economics in college. So it was a wonderful adventure for me to get into public money and then do workshops. Emily saw one of those workshops somewhere, and so here we are with another wonderful book about money. I have a stack of books on monetary reform about this big, and it's great that the timing of this book is what it is. So in introducing Kristen, I hope that maybe you can explain why the timing of your book is so, there's a word that I'm trying to think of and I can't, not fallacious or fallacious, but anyway, why is it so good that your book came out when it did? And
Right now, yeah.
tell us whatever you want.
I do think it's extremely timely, and even ironically, I was ready 2017, 18, 19, 20, thinking always, I'm too late, I'm too early. And I do think the timing is perfect. We really are at the sustainable end, let's say, of the system that we have. Just because so many crises are necessary to keep it running. The constant blowing up the bubble, crashing the bubble, blowing up the bubble, crashing the bubble. And we're at the precipice, I think, of some massive change in the next 9, 12, 18 months. And this book is sort of entering right on cue to say, hey, 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 we have not looked at what Jim Hogue was talking about from the very beginning, which is what is money? And to really start saying, do we have a conscious relationship with money? No, we don't. We just know we need to get out and earn it. We know how to spend it, but it's the most powerful tool. It's the most powerful thing that controls us in our lives. So we need to have a very conscious relationship with it. And guess what? It's not boring. It actually can be really fun. So
Yes, I looked at the first pages and ordered it right away. It's going to engage me. I recommend it I mean, I can just tell it's a wonderful story. And of course, being interested in how we can create abundance is what so many of us have been after, but you've been in the nitty-gritty. Plus, you've brought a new perspective, a feminine perspective that is creative in a nonlinear way that I think that really will serve the planet. And maybe you can kind of get into the simple nitty-gritty about the issues of money for those viewers who have not, like us, been drawn into the topic.
yeah, definitely. I think money is so loaded and culturally it's sort of it gets used to either make a story that we've been suffering with work out, get some vindication. I mean, it's amazing how emotionally sensitive it is. And I was lucky as a little girl. My dad used to have my sister and I earn our allowance, explaining to him how money worked, how the market worked. And so I had this wonderful relationship. It just seemed playful and, wondrous. And I just had to walk some dogs or find some small jobs. And then I could go into the town and buy what I wanted. And and then later on, we even invested stocks together. So it should have been no surprise to me that I became a professional, money, wealth advisor and investing people's money. But it was because I always was interested in empowerment, authenticity, how we would really free the society from this underpinning of, the sense of just not enoughness, this pernicious sense of scarcity and conflict that we have. So when I sat with my first prospective clients, I was hooked because I saw this sort of angst and pain in it. And I thought, wow, I can help them, see how wonderful money can be for them, how easy it is to understand. And I spent the next, 15 years that way until the crisis of 2008 started to come. And that's when everything changed for me.
What
Where
happened?
real awakening.
What happened then for you?
I was working on a master's degree at Tufts, and I was sort of seeing, I read an economics book that I hadn't read in a long time. And I saw that the first tenet was that money had to be scarce to have value.
It
And
had
I
to be
thought,
scarce to have value.
have value.
Yeah.
And I
Interesting.
thought, oh boy, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
This actually doesn't make sense. And, often I'll say to people, if you think of an equation where you have 3 + 4 = 7, where is money in that equation? And can't answer, right? Or they get confused. And I say, it's the equal sign, So
Nice.
right, as soon as we have an equal value of exchange, the equal sign comes. We don't have to go outside and dig them out of the ground or make sure that we've captured enough equal signs in order to make sure we have a match, because money is just supposed to be this tool that it's the facilitator of our wealth exchanges and our contributions to one another. And then, we think in this sort of, polar way where if I say it doesn't have to be scarce to have value, some people get really upset and you say, well, it can't be unlimited. No, you're right, it can't. So these were some of the things in 2008, I saw that how I believed there was, that really the American dream was possible for everyone, that there was enough money out there, that the system was really architected to support this. I found out that that was not true.
Mhm.
And something, I didn't know what it was at that point, something in my worldview was wrong. And it took me about 9 months to figure out that it wasn't political, it wasn't economic, it wasn't social. Those were just symptoms of the problem. It was monetary. That the money we're using today, the way it's designed, is so it works against us, and we actually do not have money today. There's no such thing as money today.
Mhm.
Yeah, we have debt
We have
instead,
that,
which we think is money.
which we
Yeah.
think is
But
money.
let's helping us through what you've just said so that people aren't too confused is let's define money for everybody, which you can elaborate on this, but money is an agreement. And once I started post-college, once I started understanding that money is an agreement, I realized that the money supply, and you just talked about this, can you have too much money? Whatever, the money supply should match goods and services. If the money supply matches goods and services, then you're not going to have too much money, and you're going to have those people who have earned it, as it were, capable of doing quite well. And then you're going to have a surplus, which can help the people who cannot earn it. So I'll stop there with that idea, and you can talk a little bit about your ideas for ending scarcity.
Right, right. And it's right. This is the target, because I think this is so challenging. I think the consciousness is a little bit more woven, so people are going to have an easier time, even though it still will be sort of a what at the beginning, that money is debt. And often I'll hear people say, well, money comes from debt. No, money is debt. Money is debt, and how phenomenally different this is. I would often ask people, where does money come from? And you get the range of answers, or you get no answers because people don't think about it. And we need to know where babies come from. We need to know where money comes from. And
Well, we don't know what a woman is anymore, so well, can I make a clarifying statement that all of our money now is debt, but that doesn't necessarily mean that a monetary system or a monetary method has to be that way. So we
Sure.
can agree insofar as it's an agreement to be that equal signs to make things equal. What you're talking about are the different opportunities that we have yet to try to create a sustainable abundance. And I'll let that stand right there.
Okay. Yeah. When tally sticks for 700 years were were functioning, that the money was just a measuring tool. And I'll let Kristen go into that one. But that eventually morphed into, when the Parliament burned down and all the tally sticks disappeared, the Bank of England stepped in 1694 and ended that concept of money as a tool for measuring. And they began from then on in the Western world, money as debt.
right.
And that's why there are so many wars, which we probably don't have time to go into now, but that would be fun. So why don't, Kristen, if you can talk a little bit about how the nature of money went from a measurement
Hmm.
into debt per se. And so it's no longer just an agreement, it's an agreement that money will be created by the borrower via the banks,
Right.
who then charge interest, and that becomes the rat. Because if it was just borrowing money and paying it back, it would be a much different world
Yes.
than if you're also paying the interest on the money. I
And
think I probably
why
confused
is
things.
that? Why is that, Jim? Add why that is. Or
I
Kristen.
said so many things. So which one do you want
Well,
me to?
because they put it into circulation, that which they're putting into your account as a borrowing, but they haven't put into circulation what?
Oh, okay. It's like musical chairs.
Right, exactly. They haven't put the interest in, so
Yeah.
you have to go, rape and
Mhm.
pillage and
Well,
scrape.
I would say they sort of have put the interest in. It's because the interest is still the original. So if I take a loan for 100,000, because I'm paying it back in monthly increments, I'm paying back 1,000, 2,000, and still the majority at the beginning is going to be an interest payment. But because it's the flow of the stock that I have to repay, the interest doesn't make it unpayable. But what the interest does is it adjusts the temperature. So if we are borrowing money at a high interest rate, oh boy, that means I have to run on that hamster wheel to earn, shop, borrow, repay, earn, shop, borrow, repay at an extraordinary pace. And it's really the issue that money is coming into existence through the borrower signing on the dotted line is the core problem of scarcity. And so you can see, even I would say from 1996, interest rates have done nothing but go down, even from 92, except for short increments, small increments.
Sorry.
Hmm. And and that's because they have needed to turn down the temperature of how fast we create things into stuff we have to buy, to go into debt for, to work, to throw those things out, to throw them in a dump, to create things we have to, and so the cycle. So the interest definitely makes things worse, but it is technically created. And then when the money gets paid back, the interest still exists, but the actual principal gets destroyed. So it's sort of, I'm jumping ahead of these other concepts, but this and this can be the big misnomer, because we want the focus on how money is not coming from productive value, which is Jim saying with tally sticks. And anytime we look in history, if we look at the backstory and we find out where humanity was having a renaissance or a period of beautiful creation, they did the money right. They designed it correctly. Money was truly the equal sign. And so I like to say, if the computer or the Zoom, is the technology that facilitates the communication, money is the technology that facilitates the wealth exchange.
Mhm.
But what kind of a technology is it? Is it one that's good? Has it been designed correctly? That's really the question.
I'm really interested why you don't see the interest as an issue, even though it hasn't been put into circulation. I don't think you've yet made the case, to me anyway, that it already has been put
No,
into.
it definitely is in circulation, because so let's say that I go to the bank and I want $100,000, and the bank at this point is still doing sort of a credit worthiness, but not really. They're just looking to see, can we repay what we promise that they create for us? So they say, okay, they're going to lend me the money. I sign on the dotted line, and magically they type into the $100,000, which is the head side of the quarter. It's just the friendly face of debt. So the money goes into my account, but since money is created through double book entry, the debt goes on the other side. And now I go home with now the pressure to capture it out of society and repay them in time. But just as you're saying, I have to repay interest. Now, if I had to pay the whole 100,000 back in that month, plus $5,000 of interest that month, that, if it was due in 30 days, wouldn't be payable. It would be exactly what you're saying. But because the system is done in what's called stock and flow, they create the stock of money, and then we repay it in a flow. So I fish out my $1,800 or my $1,500 to repay, and I send the check to the bank that month. 1,000 of it is interest, 500 of it is principal, or for argument's sake, let's say, 1,000 of it is principal, 500 is interest. Now I owe 99,000 next month. That $500 I pay them in interest continues to circulate in society theoretically, right? But that $1,000 I repaid is extinguished. It's destroyed.
Interesting. Thank you for getting into that specifically.
And it does encourage people to create. Of course, it also encourages people to commit crimes. But that's neither here nor there. And my point being, the point is the same. No matter what it encourages you to do, it encourages you to get off your butt and make a little bit more money so that you can not just pay back the amount you borrowed, but so that you can pay back a little more than that. And yes, indeed, that goes into circulation.
It does. And I would even say it just makes you on that hamster wheel longer, right? So if it was just interest-free money that we were borrowing, which absolutely can happen when money is designed properly, we absolutely don't need interest. We might decide as a society that interest is a good thing in terms of savings. I mean, these are all the kinds of conversations we can have once we get the tool correctly done. So what I would even say is that money being a tool, so we agree that, so our exchanges, first of all, we agree that it's better to live in community. We believe that our lives are better together than by ourselves. That's the first agreement that we make. Then the second agreement we make is that each person has something extraordinary of unique value to contribute. And whether we've lost that, I still think that that is a beautiful truth that's always whispering in the background. And even when I look at it, every time a baby is born, that particular community is more wealthy because another new divinely inspired being has come to join everyone else.
So sorry, I didn't, you were about to take a breath. I didn't know whether you were to end, but when you get a chance. May
Oh, yes. Oh, yep. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, you pegged. I think that one of the premises of the book is to peg the monetary system to productivity, services, and products. And what you just spoke of right there is a nuance, and I think I mentioned it about could we not peg the monetary system to our individual passions or our individual, I say it, money is passion. So we we create it to serve the passion rather than the products and services, and that would change things a little bit too.
Dramatically. And what I would say you're pointing at, which maybe chapter 11 or also 12 in the book, is that money and wealth are not the same thing.
Right.
They are so totally different. And I would remark over the years when I would say this to people, and often people would say, what? Well, what is wealth if it's not money? And I would say it's everything that you use money for. But beyond that, it's our passion. It's our incredible inspiration. It's our imagination. It's all the vast resources that are on this planet. Everything that everybody does, we couldn't possibly live a day without what we each and all contribute to one another.
Mhm.
And so we are so wealthy, we're born, we actually cannot be separated from our wealth because, even if someone tried to stop me from writing this book, I mean, I'd be, my last breath, I would have been typing and writing the book, at 4 a.m, because you really can't take humans away from their divinely inspired passions, which is really what wealth is.
So,
Mhm. Yeah, in my essay, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, my first line is, what is wealth?
Wow.
And I say, generally speaking, it's the sun, it's water, and the soil, because without those three things in a proper relationship, nobody lives in places where you don't have that. And from that, you have productivity because people can then use their brains and start producing things. So you've got those three elements, the soil, water, and the sun, that create the possibility for wealth. And then you have productivity that goes from there. And money is just a way of exchanging wealth between people. And from 1694, it's still a way of exchanging wealth between people, but at what cost, when it could be the kind of thing that you're talking about with the end of scarcity. And I'd like to mention that in Jim Kunstler's books, he's written a series called World Made by Hand. He's written a few books on that subject, and it's after everything has been destroyed.
mhm.
No roads, no gas, no electricity, none of the things we've come to use. But there are a few people with skills and brains, and they have rebuilt their societies on a kind of 19th century level. But I would advise people, if you want a good novel to read, look at those, and it'll inspire you to how you can work and produce in a world without banks.
Wow.
Could you please address, I think there is a big element that needs to be addressing. I mean, we're coming from an established privilege from our heritage. And the welfare state that's been created to kind of mockingly make people safe and secure. Uh, I need you to talk about the sort of depressing psychosis of the people who've created this monetary system and its as evidenced in the welfare state and that topic. Can you bring that into the conversation, please?
Sure. Oh, sure. I mean, we really have two welfare states, right?
Mhm.
So we have we have the we have the top welfare state, and we have the welfare state. And then on top of it, we really do have the middle class, which is being crushed by all of these contortions. Um, I would even argue that every section that seems to be against one another, played once against one another, even the banks want out of this system.
Mm.
Certainly the small banks, they want to be banks again. Banks have this beautiful uh, this beautiful gift of actually assessing true investment capital. But how long has it been? Has it been since the movie It Was a Wonderful Life?
Mhm.
And until you change the money, how can banks be banks anymore? So when we have the opportunity to do this, we could actually create a bank that would provide a real service for us, even though we wouldn't necessarily need them anymore. But so
Mhm. Yeah, the Bank of North Dakota is a good example. They set their limits. They have their protocols, and they create money, and then it comes back to them, which they put back into the society. It's a wonderful system that the other states are absolutely petrified of
right.
going into. And as Emily knows, I've been in the trenches in Vermont for many years, trying to explain the benefits of a state bank. And the legislators liked the idea, but there were a couple of oh gosh, what's the correct word nowadays? There were some people in high positions of power who made sure that that didn't go forward. Whether they were under pressure, whether they were just corrupt or whatever, we got a long way. We went a long
Yeah,
way with the
yeah,
legislature. 6-1 in one committee, I think, and
yeah.
5-0 in another committee, and it died. It didn't go any
Well,
further than that.
we had the head of the banking lobby, who represents
Yeah,
B of A, Chris Delia,
yeah,
feeding the script to our treasury person. So,
yes.
Jim was there explaining it, and, I was running for governor on it, and there was a brief time where they were considering it, but they managed to scuttle it, even while kind of pretending to go there. So they made a a way to lend out 10% of what we got in taxes. I don't know if it's 30%, but they stopped short of getting a banking license. And their excuse is that if we got a banking license and essentially had a North Dakota public bank, was that would ruin our bond rating. That's what
Yeah, right. It would
lawyers
do
kept
that.
saying. But
Yeah.
that didn't make any sense
No.
because
No.
we already had a AAA bond rating, and so long as we kept paying our bills, it would stay.
Yeah.
Right?
In fact, it
Yeah,
would
it
get
should
stronger.
go
It
up.
would get stronger with the public bank.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what's so frustrating is that even a public bank that's truly run by the people, that's truly for the people, is in fact the friend, the supporter, just as you see in North Dakota, of private banks, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
So, because
Yes.
if the money is circulating, then credit worthiness is higher. If money is where borrowers want it and contributors are making things and people are doing real work, credit worthiness is fabulous. So
Yes.
as long as the money is flowing in the right quantity, that now we have no credit problems. And the problem with the other commercial banks is that since their capital to asset ratio, which is their solvency, is so thin, and they're so caught up in this cycle of having to produce more debt, so more money flows before it's extinguished, and that they probably don't know how, if they understood the system, they probably don't know how to get off the system.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
And there is a merit to some of it, which creates a relative amount of stability, but it still creates this horrible contorted world where everything gets perverted. That's beautiful.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and I think that the villains in that story were able to easily convince a few key people who didn't understand money
Mhm.
that the bond rating would go down.
Oh,
So
yeah.
all they have to do is insert the boogeyman, and they win. It has nothing to, they just make stuff up.
Right.
So it has nothing to do with the truth, and it has nothing to do with sound monetary policy.
Mhm.
It's just that certain members of the banking community wouldn't have it.
Can you bring in the topic of taxation? I know that because the IRS is kind of, you know, maybe going through a nasty metamorphosis, it's on everybody's mind. But I also like the idea of a money that doesn't need to be taxed, and it could certainly be feed. I mean, we could have fees, or we can put it in circulation
Mhm.
for all the services. So do you see that as well, Kristen?
Oh, absolutely. Taxes on the federal level. Anytime you have a sovereign government which is producing its own currency, and of course this could go for the state of Vermont or any state that, like in the 1800s, issued its own money backed by the people's production, there's no income tax required. You know, a temporary tax would be helpful if, you know, with inflation. So, you know, what we're seeing in, you know, it's so ironic. I'm just going to jump a tiny bit. When you go back to the 2008 crisis versus what we have now with the pandemic and whatnot, you had so tremendously much money created in 2008 through 2009, 10, during the quantitative easing or QE phases, and we had no inflation, right? We even had deflation.
Mhm.
Rates went down, you know, this whole thing. So just creating money, the government just creating money does not produce inflation, because that money, of course, did not go into society. It just went onto the back of the banks as reserves, or the big banks bought stocks, or it inflated housing prices, which created more of that squeeze of you know, an unaffordable life. And in juxtaposition, what we have today, the pipelines were shut down, energy was shut down, and then checks like helicopter money went to the people, and the demand for real products and services got kerosene put on top of it. So the real demand of stuff for people, I mean, this is real inflation that we're seeing, it's not monetary, got completely heated up. And you could solve this inflation in 30 days if you opened the supply chains, you know, allowed energy to flow, by changing also the money, by issuing production backed dollars. You also would end the inflation very, very quickly. So this relates to the tax issue in the sense that the only time we want to have the ability of a governing polity to tax is if the quantity of money in the real circulation where the real people are living is too great, that it's actually more than the real productive capacity. So then it's creating monetary inflation.
Mhm.
And, you know, the founding fathers, the colonists, they knew this well. They would come in, you would come in and just sponge up some of that excess money. And, you know, I think that we may know, but clearly governments don't need revenue to run on the federal level. You know, when they make the Social Security checks, they type them into the accounts.
Mhm.
It's totally irrelevant of what type of tax revenue is coming in. Now, the state of Vermont, that's not the case today, or any state in the country. They're all dependent on their revenue. So state taxes today are still real to run their state governments. But if they were issuing their own community currencies or different things like that, it would not be required.
Mhm.
Jim, may I, or Jim, do you have a pressing? Because I have a pressing, a sort of topic I'd like you to touch upon.
Well,
With-
yeah, go for it. I have some more topics here, particularly what Kristen and I spoke of in some detail on the phone, which was how the farmers could benefit the country and how the country could benefit the farmers. But
yeah.
please go ahead, Emily, with
Well,
your.
that's exactly where I was going. Is when we have corporate profiteering, and we have Bill Gates and Monsanto using their enormous sway and power through accumulated wealth to do things that are damaging. Can you describe how we can do how a monetary system can, in and of itself, create environmental prudence?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, and this is even again sort of comes from a misnomer of it'll sound like a misnomer relative to the cultural dialogue we're having today. You can only end scarcity through abundance. Right? So when you have this feeling of plenty is the only thing that will end scarcity. And because if we're still coming from not enoughness and we're still coming from sustainability or just barely enough, we're in the consciousness of scarcity and we're going to continue to create it. And the reason why we see these contortions, whether it's with Monsanto or who knows what Bill Gates is doing with the food supply and all these other kinds of things, or, who's buying all these houses. And this comes, the root of it is that money is being created as a thing rather than as a verb, right? It's just this facilitation of our wealth exchange, right? And so therefore, when it's made as a thing, it can be created scarce. It can be made scarce. So we're actually living in the illusion of scarcity. It's not the reality of scarcity. And I even say somewhere in the book, when you pull the Wizard of the Oz curtain behind, what do you find? You actually find abundance. We're living in an abundant society that just because we're using the wrong technology of money, they're able to create an illusion of scarcity that we're all buying into, and that we want someone else to fix it for us instead of taking the responsibility ourselves. And that's how also we can get angry at our leaders, because just enough of critical mass of us haven't taken the responsibility. And so if we now no longer have this illusion of scarcity, well, Bill Gates can do whatever he chooses. Monsanto can do what they choose. And we likewise, if we want something different, can go and say, thank you very much. Nice to see you. And we do something else.
Mhm.
It's nothing has to be ripped down. Things start to just become quaint and irrelevant.
Thank you.
On that idea, I was on a Zoom call earlier at 1 o'clock today, and I brought up the supply chain problem, which is creating an artificial scarcity, so that people go to the store or they go to get parts. It's happened to me a few times, and the parts are not available and they can't readily get them.
Right.
Now that has an effect all the way down the line. So if a builder, can't get what he needs to build the house, well, then there's a delay in building the house. So throughout society, there have been some delays in the supply, and that is therefore a delay in production.
Right.
And wonderful people have written how that's all created by corrupt people. That doesn't have to be.
No.
That was imposed. That deliberate breakdown in the supply chain was caused by individual people. And think what Gates could do. I don't really know what's in his head and in his heart, but think what he could do after he buys up all that farmland. So anyway, could you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I do really believe that this what we're in is a reorganization, a controlled demolition of society. And that's why the book, The End of Scarcity, is coming at exactly the right time, because we may be experiencing more scarcity than we ever have in our lifetimes, especially in the United States in recent history. And we are on that edge still of the dawn of the new abundant world, when we find out, wait a minute, the only thing that creates all of this is misdesigning that dollar. We can easily change it. And then it brings home the greater issues that the supply chains need to be more local. The food security needs to be more local. Everything, every region, should be more independent, so that we also have greater say over how the soil is being treated, what's in the food, what do we want, how do we collectively want to create the world. So, I think the only positive about this sort of potential grim future that could be in the short run is it will have people go back to the culture of the late 1800s and early 1900s and say, wow, money is fascinating. These topics are actually fascinating, and they are the most important topics in my life. And I better get educated, because I can make a difference with my community. And even I can see if a company does this, because even if we saw Amazon coming in or Apple coming in and producing raising money by producing, instead of getting bonds from Wall Street or selling equity, if they decided just to issue their own currency backed by production, even if we said, well, I don't know if I trust Apple or Amazon, but because they're doing the money correctly, it facilitates the whole change of getting rid of this illusion of scarcity. And there's a little bit more to it. I mean, the book really explains a couple checks and balances that will come in with the money this way. And it's amazing how it will remove this horrible trap that we're in.
Yeah, I mean, one of the primary possibilities that we all share resides in our ability to imagine abundance. Because if we are, if we're talking about manifesting this abundant world, we first have to think about it. And I've been led to this particular teacher online named Neville Goddard, which I find that person is I think could be very helpful to a lot of people, because people haven't trained their brains or their thoughts to think abundantly. They think, oh my God, I don't have enough of that. Or, oh my God, I don't have enough. And instead of, and what this teacher does is he says, well, when you fall asleep, you've got to live in the desire fulfilled. As you fall asleep, you've got to imagine it until you feel it. And that really is the essence of prayer, he says, rather than begging for something, it's to live in that desire. So altering our collective mindset away from a belief in either that people deserve, I'm just a little peon, I deserve, that's part of the bigger picture. And then also understanding what can happen through your book. Can you speak a little bit about the communities that you were touching on, about how the certificates were coming in? We've got about 15 minutes left.
Absolutely. It is just that. I mean, I was saying with Jim earlier that farmers in particular really are the real 1% of our society, right? They really are the true wealthy, and they are the most important people in our society. And so I've often said that if money is supposed to be backed by production rather than backed by debt, and even sometimes they'll say that's really backing money by credit versus backing money by debt, or creating money as debt. We create money as the promise of credit that we know is wanted and can be delivered. So the people who are producing real things and things that we need to live on this earth are extraordinarily important people in society. And so there's a wonderful way. I mean, farmers already do the shares, their CSA shares, their community shares, where in the winter they say, if you pay $400, you then get a promise to come for 20 weeks for a box of food. Already that's sort of backed, that's money that's sort of backed by production, because I could take my email and go somewhere and exchange it for an equal amount of value of that food. And it's not that money backed by production becomes barter. When I talked about this in 2008 and 2009, or even 2012, people would say, what are you talking about, Kristen? Are we going back to barter? And I would say, well, we barter today, but it's monetized. So whenever we decide to buy something, we're saying, what do I do in order to have the ability, the stored credit that I contributed to someone in order to take what I want, to take what I need. So it's just that the technology of money, when it's backed by the right amount of production that truly exists, limited by supply and demand, now we've found the formula as to how the quantity of money should come into society, where it should come into society, and how it should circulate. So I happen to run into a group of people who are ready, just from some of the, discomfort that we're seeing in the world, the worry of this sort of controlled demolition, have started creating certificates backed by cement, gas, farming, all different kinds of things they do. And this already is beginning the consciousness that all those who came before us knew that money in this sort of vein was supposed to come into society.
That's beautiful.
And one thing that Abe Collins is working on is it keeps the farmers. Okay, let me back up a bit. The farmers are under pressure to make their product in the cheapest and most efficient way possible. Most of the farmers today can only do that with commercial fertilizer. It's the consumer that can really help, because the consumer can say, I'm willing to pay you a little bit more if you do not create GMO food. And so in Vermont, I've seen some of that become very successful with about 5% of the population. But could you talk a little bit about if we're, I don't want to romanticize farmers, but on the other hand, they are what you said they are. They are the most important people on the planet. And when you force them to go out of business, you've made a mistake somehow.
Yes.
And so farmers need to be able to be motivated without destroying the planet.
Right. I always say that there is no seller without a buyer. There is no buyer without a seller. And, we get conditioned when money is created as debt and the illusion of scarcity is perpetuated to think the person with the money has more power than the person with the thing. And in fact, they're equal, because the person with the money has just the credit that they contributed to someone else before. And we equally need each other, just like 3 + 4 needs 7. And it's this symbiotic, beautiful relationship, even with the opportunity to come to know ourselves as we have the opportunity to contribute. And when you look at farming, especially beautiful farming with rich soil or gorgeous food, we know that the nutrition value is not comparable to food that's being mass produced or monocultured or GMO'd. And when people start to really get a little bit more space, which also will come when the money systems change and correct, because we'll have a break from the hamster wheel. We'll no longer be on that hamster wheel. We'll be able to say where every dollar I spend is truly an investment. Who am I investing in, like crowdfunding? And when I was going through all this research, I was thinking how wonderful. This was Whole Foods before they were bought out by Amazon. And if they went in the front of their stores and just did a capital raise across the country and said, gosh, we're going to offer, coupons or credits of food at the store, and it's 10% off or 15% off. And across the board, they would raise millions of dollars. And then Whole Foods customers or Costco customers would have the ticket that would allow them to come to the store and shop at a prepaid discount. Then Whole Foods, now raising money without interest, could go directly and invest in farmers whose land has become exponentially more expensive as real estate development has moved in. They could go to the farmers and buy their tractors and help them with their land, and the farmers could pay back the money in produce. And now you've closed the loop in investing in what we want. And then because the money or the I'm using a Whole Foods dollar, or I could be using an Amazon dollar, it very easily starts getting accepted in many places. As I pondered this idea, many people told me, oh, it's pie in the sky, it would never happen, so on and so on. And within about a day or two, I ran into an article that Costco was demoing something just like this. And they were doing it on the Baja Peninsula, and they had a shortage of organic food. They couldn't find farmers. So they decided to take their own capital. I mean, it was missing turning it into money, but they took their own capital. They bought all the stuff for the farmers, and the farmers paid them back in organic raspberries.
Yeah, well, that's it.
Right? This is so easy. It could be done with Uber. It could be done with Airbnb. It could be done. But most importantly, it can be done in our communities with regional co-op farmers. I mean, that's really the backbone of creating community money and setting the example the federal government could issue this, but they could only issue as much money as they had productive value services that people wanted.
Yep.
Mm.
Well,
Vermont could issue their money, but only to the limit of where they were providing valuable services to people.
Kristen, what I'd love to talk to you about beyond this phone call after I read your book and all that wonderful stuff is what I want to see is that more people get a taste of producing a small amount of their own food supply,
Wow.
and how can we create that in a business model? And I'd love to talk to you about that without bringing the whole plan forward in this show, if you're willing. Because
Oh, I would.
yes, yes.
Yeah, no, I would love it. It really is. I also think that when people grow their own food, they come back into touch with the magic and the wonderment of life.
And the generosity.
Oh, yes.
The generosity of seed. It's like that counters the scarcity.
Yeah,
And
it's the truth is that we live in an abundant world. It's all around us. And I can switch my perspective and suddenly see the scarcity, but it's a shift of lens of perspective. And the end of scarcity actually really is easy because it is an illusion. And we just need to come to know that money is supposed to be like a ruler and also a store of value and a receipt for services rendered, but it must keep its stable value because the inch remains an inch remains an inch.
Mhm.
So how does the dollar remain a dollar when it's backed by productive value, limited by supply and demand? So it'll be constantly changing, but that's that measure, but we have the technology now to do it. The really wonderful thing about the book is that it's written in this very accessible adventure story with a reveal each chapter. And so the feedback I've gotten is it's actually been hard to put down and so entertaining, which I think creates somehow this perfect balance between the intensity and the importance of this topic, where it gives you this sweet, soft kind of pat on the head and encouragement while we go through this complete paradigm shift.
Jim, thank you for securing and finding Kristen. This will be a whole doorway to go through for me. Thank you, Jim. So, Jim, we're just
Well, if we
at the
do
top.
this again, we can go to Franklin versus Hamilton and a lot of other topics that are touched on in the book.
Oh, I would love that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Make a list of the things that you wanted to talk about and didn't get to.
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say it really is. I mean, this, when you get into it, becomes the most fascinating topic in the world because it's the true history of our world.
Yeah, it is. And it's the true potential.
It's true potential.
And it shows up in this concept that I learned a long time ago, that the sovereign creates the money. So if you are the sovereign, then you have the ability to create the money. And it hit me hard in the face in the 2008 when the bankers were able to inform the government who would be prosecuted and how long they had to prosecute. And the prosecutors had to drop everything because Obama and Holder prevented them from putting the criminals in jail. The bankers were the sovereigns, and that made it perfectly clear. So let's become the sovereigns by creating the money.
That's right. And that's where it really comes down to, we are the sovereigns, right? We just have forgotten, and we've been conditioned, and society has been arranged in such a way that we can't see it, but we can. We have the courage to look, and we have the tools to do it. So I really do believe that we are on the precipice that no previous generation, no matter how far back we go in 5,000 years has been, humanity has never been there. So this is so exciting of what we truly can create, and I think will.
Well, let's have you back, again in a month and a half or so, or 2 months, because we're hitting a very interesting transition ahead. And it'll be marvelous to get into the more of the nuts and bolts, I think. And thank you. Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you both. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
I'm
And
gonna put up,
so much fun.
I'm gonna put up your book again. There you go.
Can find it everywhere.
Jim, would you like to say goodbye for all of us, please?
Goodbye for all of us. And I'll put this up when Emily sends me the link. I'll put it up on BitChute, and probably Rob Williams will put it up at Vermont Independent, because that's what we like to put up there.
Yep. And I
And
put
we'll
it
see
up on
what
Rumble,
happens.
and I put it up on the cable access. Of course, you'll be able to do that as well. I'll put it up on YouTube. I don't think we're going to trigger any censorship there. So,
Oh, we might. Rob Williams has been cut off of YouTube.
well,
The whole Vermont Independent is gone. It's no longer on YouTube. So that they you never know what they're gonna what they're gonna take away. So, and we can talk about later my writing a review of the
Oh,
book.
that'd be wonderful. Yeah, I think also YouTube posted today, like, big losses or something, and their CEO is leaving because so many people have left YouTube with the censorship. So,
Mhm. Yep.
but yeah, it's so exciting. Thank you. I love this, and I'm open to doing more at any time.
thank you, Kristen.
All
Thank you,
right,
Jim.
night.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.